We have 3 items on our agenda today. We are going to be talking about tree removal, penalties and remedies, as well as tree protection during large events at our parks, and our new tree planting plan that the Parks Board has been working on. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I know some folks are looking to speak and provide public comment. We're going to have our staff presentations first, and then public comment, and then we'll have discussion, and if any recommendations want to be made by our committee, we can do that at that time. Can I just get a show of hands for folks who were looking to speak, so I have an idea? Okay, I've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay. Let me think through a number of minutes. It'll be 2 to 3. Just want to make sure everybody gets a chance and we have a full discussion. So let's see where we get after these presentations. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nikki and staff.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Thank you. As you've noted today, we have 3 items for discussion. These items were referred to committee on the April 1st, 2025 City Council meeting. Of course, it's very appropriate that we're discussing trees, us being the City of Oaks. The first item being tree removal, the penalties and remedies. So this item will go over landscaping requirements for different scenarios and subsequently what occurs if those requirements are not met. Mr. Rometta will give us the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. Justin Rometta with Planning and Development. I'm also joined today by Zach Manor from Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources, the city's urban forester. As Mr. Jones said, we'll be going over the first item, 2402, related to tree removal and subsequent penalties and remedies. As Mr. Jones noted, this item was referred from the April 1st meeting, as you may recall. And again, this presentation is just a high-level overview of some requirements that coexist in both the city's UDO and in the city code. So when we're talking about when tree planting or other landscaping requirements apply, they're generally going to fall into one of these 5 categories that you see here. Parking lot, landscaping, or other vehicular surface area, drive-throughs, etc. Forestation requirements that apply in the 3 water supply watersheds. Transition yards or protective yards that apply generally between incompatible uses. Tree conservation requirements that preserve existing stands of healthy trees, and then street trees that are planted in city rights-of-way or on other city property as well. So before going into a little bit of detail on each of those 5 categories, I did just want to note that this is fairly high level, probably not enough time today to go into every detail and nuance as to when these requirements apply. There are, just did want to note that there are exceptions and reductions that may apply. For example, a property owner always has the ability to seek a design alternate or a variance to the zoning code. GSI incentives exist, so in exchange for a GSI stormwater device, some planting requirements may be reduced. A lot of these requirements would not apply to changes of use in existing buildings, small additions, 1- and 2-family homes, et cetera. So I did just want to point that out before going through the 5 categories in detail. With that said, with regard to parking lots or other vehicular surface area, these planting requirements apply to new parking lots that have 10 or more spaces. They consist of things like perimeter islands and interior islands, as you can see on the image here, that are required at regular intervals throughout the parking lot. So as part of the development process, a property owner gets a site plan approved. They go construct their building and parking lot, install the landscaping, it gets inspected. And then from that point on, the property owner is responsible for its maintenance as well. And so if some of those trees die or become otherwise diseased or unhealthy, they are required to be replaced within 30 days. There are exceptions for weather conditions, so we wouldn't require replanting in the middle of August, right? We would allow that to be kind of punted to the following spring. But they do need to be replaced. If the trees are removed purposefully and willfully, the remedy that the city has from the zoning code perspective is to assess civil penalties. So we can assess $1,000 fine for the first tree that's removed, and then $100 per caliper inch of the total that has been removed from the property. And then that also comes with a replanting requirement. So an equal diameter of what was removed would need to be replanted. If ultimately the situation is not remedied, not replanted, the fines aren't paid, we then have the ability to assess fines at $500 a day. Protective yards similarly apply generally when mixed uses or mixed use zoning is adjacent to residential zoning or residential uses. Certain uses also carry a requirement for protective yards regardless of what is adjacent to them. Certain zoning districts require protective yards regardless of the use on the property. But these are generally around the perimeter of the property. They can be planted, or existing trees can be preserved to satisfy the requirements, provided they meet minimum dimensional spacing requirements, et cetera. And again, the remedies there for removal are exactly the same as the previous slide. It's essentially fines and civil penalties and a requirement to replant. So I'm going to turn it over to Zach now to talk about the remaining few categories, but I'm happy to come back up and answer any questions afterwards.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Zach Manor, Raleigh Parks. You'll see some repetition of the penalties. These are all sort of held in the same general vicinity for this first portion. So I'm going to talk about our forestation requirement. So that occurs all lots in our water supply watersheds. They have the opportunity to plant or preserve, or a combination of both. If trees are removed in these situations, we have the same penalties. It's $1,000 for the first tree, 35 cents per square foot if there are no trees absent. And then when stumps are present, it's $1,000 for the first tree plus $100 in diameter, and that's measured at 4.5 foot above it's measured 2 ways on the stump. And any sort of restoration requires a plan, and replanting is required in these situations. Tree conservation. When and where on this one? This takes place during subdivisions and site plans of 2+ acres. This is preservation only. Sort of show an example of a tree conservation plan on the top and sort of what that area looks like in the field. That has the same penalty, $1,000 for the first tree, 35 cents per square foot, $1,000 or $100 an inch when stumps are present. And then again, approved restoration plan and replanting are required. So these are some examples of what a replanted tree conservation area looks like. So on the left, the pine trees were removed. The second picture to the right, sort of what that replanting looks like. We have some requirements around size of tree, density for planting. So that's a reestablishment of a tree conservation area. Another example, similar. So planting 2 to 3 inch trees at a certain distance to help replace. So once those trees are planted, then the understory and everything is allowed to fill in as well. So it doesn't look like the woods at the beginning, but it becomes that before too long. We'll switch a little bit to street trees, city trees. So this is governed under City Code Part 9, Chapter 8, Trees and Vegetation. So a city tree is a tree that has its trunk located entirely or in part on city-owned or controlled property. And that includes any boundary trees. And those are usually regulated through a tree impact permit. So that's consent given in writing to a person to undertake any tree disturbing activity. So we have a little bit of a different sort of penalty structure on these. So each violation requires a $100 administration fee and then a $250 civil penalty for the first offense. Second offense is $500 within a 24-month period. So trees that are just damaged would require a remediation plan. Trees that are destroyed require a remediation plan, and you have to replant caliper inches of tree removed on a 1-to-1 basis. So a 10-inch tree would require 10 inches of trees to be replanted. You could do that through 2 5-inch trees, 5 2-inch trees, sort of whatever makes the most sense for that space. And in situations where you're not able to replace those caliper inches on site, there's a fee in lieu required at $100 an inch. And then once that tree is replanted, it's required to be warrantied for 2 years, and then the city takes back over maintenance and oversight of those trees. All right, that's the end of the presentation for the first item.
And just to check, are there any questions about that item with the committee? Councilmember Patton?
Yeah, I have a couple. Thanks, Zach. Some might be for Justin, too. When we collect fines, I know sometimes, perhaps not here, sometimes when we are collecting fines, a lot of the funds themselves are actually remitted to the school system. When we collect fines on these violations, are they remitted back to the city?
So I don't want to speak for the planning, but the UDO fees are typically go to the county. So if it's a tree conservation fee or a parking lot fee, I think I'm saying that correctly, I don't want to speak for them. But we do retain the fee in lieu when a city tree is destroyed. So we use those funds to replant trees throughout the city.
Got it. Okay. I see Pat behind.
Good evening, or good afternoon, Pat Young, Planning and Development. It's my understanding, I'll defer to the Attorney's Office, that that's a statutory requirement, that any zoning violation fine go to the county for the school system.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, it's fine versus a fee would be something to, reimburse us for something that we need to replant. A fine is just a penalty and 10% we keep and the rest goes to the state.
Okay. Got it. And then in one of these, the TCA replanting, you're obviously replanting with trees that are smaller than the ones that were removed. And you spoke to it on the street trees, that just the total amount of caliper inches have to be covered. On some of these other ones, like like on the parking lot trees, if they're damaged, do they have to be, I understand that they have to, you're saying they have to be replaced with a tree of the same size, but maybe sometimes that's not good for the tree itself. Is there consideration for putting in a tree that will remain healthy once it's in the tree pit?
So specifically, there are some different variations. For tree conservation, you have the option to, it's typically area-based is how we establish it. It's less about the size of the tree itself. It's more of an area. So you have to replant a certain number of caliper inches within that area. And that tree conservation area remains the same, whether it's 5 small trees or 1 large tree. So there is some variability there. From the parking lot context, I'll defer.
Yeah, very similar. It could be, it's just a 1-to-1 replacement of caliper inches. If it makes sense to plant some other type of species that otherwise, if the requirement is a shade tree, any type of shade tree could be replanted. Doesn't necessarily have to be the same species. If something else might work better, or if, it works better in that space to plant multiple smaller trees, that would be allowed to.
Okay, got it. And then my last one is just the only method of notice to begin enforcing these things is complaint-driven, citizen-initiated complaints mostly?
Yeah, from a zoning standpoint, certainly, we operate on a complaint basis. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to give some background to this item. The reason that we're going over this was there was a complaint specifically about trees removed from a special highway overlay district. So would that be considered a protective yard? Do I have that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
so, and especially in that case where you're next to a highway, those trees are, not only good for the environment, but also it's about the noise, keeping residents not having to look or hear the highway quite as much. So if residents do see something that is, amiss about trees get removed, you would make that complaint to zoning enforcement in the planning department. Any other questions right now from council or comments? Okay, this is really just information, letting folks know, what is the process if there is a violation. So we can go on to the next topic.
Zach, I'll say a few words here. So this item was recently brought to our attention due to some resident concerns about tree protection prior to the Dreamville Festival. Well, Madam Chair, you and I have discussed that this is not just about Dreamville or Dix Park. This is really about all our parks. So with that, Whitney Schoenfield.
Was there Was there a specific incident that triggered this, or this is just a general concern because we have some large trees? Just want to understand what triggered this.
You're talking about the tree protection during large
Correct.
events? Yeah, there were some concerns from residents. They sent in photos about protecting critical root zones of the
Okay.
trees during events while people are loading in their equipment, not while the festival is going on, but before and after.
Okay.
But were any of the trees damaged? I mean,
Yeah, that's my
I mean, that's
question.
the question I have.
Yeah, I just want to know if any trees have been damaged.
I mean, have y'all done some type of review, parks folks or anybody else?
We have done some preliminary review, and we've got some information we'd like to share with you today about this. But generally speaking, Councilmember Silver is both and to your question. So we did get concerns about the critical root zone, about the way we provide guidance on tree mats, for example, and maybe the lack thereof of signage. So in all of this, I feel like there are things that we can do better as city staff, and I think we're going to talk about some of that stuff today.
Yes, absolutely. And Councilmember Fort will address your question and my talking points as well.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. So once again, I'm Whitney Schoenfeld with the Office of Special Events. I will start off by first giving some background on Dreamville Festival. So over the course of 5 festivals, we have built a strong relationship with Dreamville organizers, and we're very proud of what we've been able to accomplish together at Dorothea Dix Park and really putting Dorothea Dix Park on the map as well. So the festival first launched in 2019. At the time, attendance was limited to 39,000 attendees. It has since grown over the 5 festivals into a 2-day event with 52,500 people each day. People are traveling here from all 50 states and over 24 countries as well. So local hotels see record numbers when Dreamville Festival is taking place, and the festival contributes millions of dollars in economic impact to our area. You may recall that this year's event was promoted as the 5th and final Dreamville Festival, so I did just want to highlight to the public that we did sign a multi-year agreement with the festival, so it will return in some form. It just will be partially new, but the festival will be returning. So today we're here to address a few community concerns specifically related to the festival's infrastructure and its impact on trees at Dix Park. So the special event permitting process is extensive for Dreamville Festival. It begins earlier than any other event that we permit, 6 months plus in advance of the festival. It involves coordination across multiple departments and partner agencies, and each year organizers also host a community meeting that the public is invited to attend to hear about the event and its impacts to neighbors of the park or those surrounding the park. Following the event each year, we collect all feedback from all stakeholders involved in the event to hear how things went. So this process results in an after-action report. It identifies strengths, challenges, corrective actions, areas for improvement. So this year, feedback regarding trees will be included in that report. We've had some initial conversations with Dreamville organizers to share the feedback that we've received about trees, and we already have some proactive suggestions in place for future years. So some of these include meeting on site with park staff before the build-out begins of Dreamville and identifying those no-go zones around the trees. Installing additional signage to make sure that it is clear that any vendors or any vehicles on site aren't parking within tree protection areas. Installing additional protective matting and doing that matting earlier in the planning process, because once they're already on site, building everything out, it's very costly and often difficult to get additional matting once they're already here. So making those plans earlier. Reinforcing messaging with private security teams. There's a lot of vendors and a lot of people involved in the event that are all parking and driving out at the park. So just reinforcing messaging to all of those groups to also stay off of tree protection route areas. And also continuing to discuss these issues. Dreamville has daily department head meetings in the week leading up to show days with all of their different departments involved in the event. And they did address trees for this year's event once we heard the feedback that we did, and they will plan on continuing to do that as well. Also, as the city secures more leaseback property, we're exploring parking solutions that can better allow vendors and whatnot to park in other areas. Right now, parking is limited at the park just based on other stakeholders at the park. Councilmember Fort, to address your question earlier, we have talked with park staff, and they have shared with us that any trees out at the park are in fair condition, and if any are showing signs of decline, it's really about their age, genetics, living conditions, and that the festival would not be a sole contributing factor to their decline, and that it's highly unlikely that Dreamville has resulted in any decline to our trees. So I'll also share that the Dix Park team within Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources has previously created a Dix Park event rental guide that outlines guidelines and expectations, and they will be working to make enhancements to that guide. Dreamville organizers submit detailed site maps, and all vehicles are directed along pre-approved ingress and egress routes that have matting to get onto the field. The challenge is with, again, hundreds of vehicles out at the park, perfect execution is challenging, but Dreamville and city staff are committed to making improvement. Multiple walkthroughs are conducted before and after every event, and again, we're exploring options like marking no-go zones around tree root areas, additional signage, additional matting. While fencing is allowable around trees, we want to prevent the placement of heavy infrastructure like generators and dumpsters near tree roots. Dreamville has invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in turf restoration over the past 5 festivals. As a result, the field often ends up looking in better condition once the grass has grown back. And looking ahead, we're considering other options like air spade work, which would reduce the soil compaction around the tree root zones. And that's something the city is planning to do this year. So again, we fully acknowledge that there's always room for improvement, and we're committed to minimizing tree-related concerns at Dreamville Festival, at all events at Dix Park, and across all of our parks.
Councilmember Silver.
Excuse me. I'll rarely say this, but I will because it's obvious. As serving in a New York City Parks Commissioner, we had events of similar size, up to 60,000, the Great Lawn. And if you go back to your slide, Whitney, I'll applaud the park staff and special events. We followed all the protocols you have listed here. I think the only one that is missing is that we used a series of gates that had zones with a center aisle for emergency access. And as people came in, they filled in those areas, but the entire perimeter would protect the public, not necessarily around trees, but where the public can go, and vehicles were limited to a perimeter. But apart from that, everything you're going through, having, figuring out the load in, load out, where the vendors are going to be located, where you have to put mats down, going through a walkthrough, everything that I see, I'm very impressed, and you're all doing the right thing to protect both the trees and the property. We also had insurance and a large bond in case there was any damage. You could immediately restore it because that's the worst thing you want. And if there's rain, the event was typically canceled because it could take 3 months for the lawn to replenish. So I'm impressed with what I'm seeing. So I'd just be curious from some of the public comments, what are people seeing that could give the park staff in the city more guidance on how to protect some of those beautiful champion trees that we have in Dix Park? But I have to say, after looking at this, you're following all the standard protocol for large events.
Well, and what I would say is, the point that you addressed, which was my question, has there been any obvious damage or anything done to the trees? Because, Dreamville is one of the signature events for the city of Raleigh, and it's critical for our, economic impact. And certainly, if there's not been any damage to any of the trees or any specific issues, I'm not really sure that we want to come out and attack one of our signature events over something that is not a provable issue. And so if there's any decline with the trees, and that's really subject to their age, that's one thing. But if we're, making accusations that, one of our signature events is causing damage, and that's not a provable accusation, I'm not really sure what we're discussing today or why we're even really having this conversation. But again, if there's no issue, there's no damage, I'm not really sure that we want to be taking this particular position against the folks at Dreamville and making suggestions that they have to go above and beyond to try to control something that's not really an issue or not an issue that they're contributing to.
I can address a little bit of your point there as well. Sort of to the council member's suggestion, we checked some other places, looked for what other locations do for big events. They provide proactive tree maintenance, they establish tree protection zones, limited vehicle access points, and matting and signage. So opportunities. Most of the concerns that were raised here were around compaction of roots. So this isn't a scenario where broken branches, things hitting trees, things along those lines. It's compacting the soil around the trees. So a public tree interacts with the public all the time, not just during big events. The main concerns here were around large equipment. And so trees, much like people, you can hurt them where you can see it, and sometimes you can do some damage that you don't notice right away, right? So I would agree that direct correlation to an event isn't really possible. But what I would say is our opportunities to improve would reduce some of that compaction and sort of coordinate through the piece. So from my professional opinion is we can do things better, but at the same time, these are public trees and they interact with people and vehicles and things like that all the time. So being good stewards and doing our best in these higher volume situations, we can work together to do that. So just to talk a little bit about some of those things to follow up on sort of what Whitney talked about, the big one is air spading. So to tell you about air spading is think about a fire hose, only it's air. So it's large compressed air. You can put it in the soil. It basically fills the soil cavities with air and moves the soil around. So because it's air, it doesn't damage roots, it doesn't damage infrastructure, it doesn't damage wires. It's just a way to break that compaction up in the areas around those trees themselves, especially the areas that get the most heavy interactions and have the most dense soil. It's a great opportunity as we go through the process. So if you can see in the picture, this is actually an oak right outside of Flowers Cottage. It's kind of hard to see in the picture, but we did some air spading there. It's sort of a radial out from the center of tree that allows us to provide more space for roots to grow, amend the soil, provide some benefits to the tree as a whole. So air spading is a good way sort of after the fact to help mitigate. And much like Whitney laid out, sort of taking a look at that layout map and see where we can make some improvements. A lot of the photographs and the concerns were there were mats there, the truck just happened to be off the mat. So doing a better job about signage, things along those lines, and sort of our communication with the folks and as we go through the process is a great way to help. I think the additional signage, fencing where possible, and additional protective mats would go a long way.
Councilmember
Zach,
Silver.
You just said the mat, but the truck was, can you just repeat that part you just said again?
Sure.
about the
So
mat and the truck?
there were mats at the major identified egress, entrance and exit points, also along the backside of the stage, but there were some situations where subcontractors were not on the matting, or like a generator was placed or a dumpster was placed in proximity to a tree.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the last slide for that.
Yeah, and I'll just add a comment. I think, what I'm seeing here, this review of the rental guide for opportunities to improve tree protection, to me, that's for all of our parks, for any kind of large event. So I think to Councilmember Fort's point, I think Dreamville is an excellent vendor and contractor and provides a ton of positive economic impact and awesome music to the city of Raleigh. So this is more just looking at in the future how we can be proactive and ensure that all of our best practices are followed.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure that I don't know who's going to make a comment about this one, but the public should be rest assured that at least what I've observed is showing that this Parks Department, special events, and I'm assuming, to what extent the Conservancy are using a great deal of care to make sure that this landscape is protected and preserved. One of the things I used to complain about the most, and it's not happening here, so grateful in Raleigh, is that people would barbecue and then dump their coals at the base of a tree. And that was, believe it or not, something we tried to control. But seeing what I'm seeing here, I'm very pleased with the guideline. There's always room for improvement. Unless it's a very solid fence, if it's just a pole with a rope, it could be easily breached if there's a large crowd. And so, yeah, there's always room for improvement, but it sounds like the approach and Dreamville, it was a perfect test case with over 50,000 people, that there was no significant damage done. Wasn't pleased to hear that some trucks are not using the mats, so that's something I'm sure when an event comes back again, that will be reiterated, and whether there's some violation or at least some message sent would, I think, bring us all a sense of relief.
Yeah, I appreciate the sort of approach to continuous improvement. Dreamville is a great event, but also these champion trees need to be around they've already been around for hundreds of years. We want to keep them around for hundreds more, and protecting their critical root zone is important to making sure they have the longest life they can. I'm curious about, these things are great, additional signage, additional fencing, additional protective mats. There's so many people coming and going during the load in and load out of that event. And I imagine sometimes these are somewhat quickly passing moments in time, right? The truck is put in, and by the time a complaint goes through the email and makes it to you, then maybe the truck's already gone. I'm trying to get around to a question of capacity. Is there enough staff to see these things in real time and provide the gentle nudge to the subcontractor that's like, hey guys, can you put your generator on the mat?
I would defer to Whitney on the communication with the contractor. We try to have one sole point of contact.
Yeah, so our office would be the sole point of contact with the event organizer. It is, again, challenging, like you mentioned, the trucks can move by the time we hear about it if we're out there and then the truck isn't there. But certainly if they are there, we can address it with them right then and there. There's other issues that have come up during setup and whatnot, and the event organizers are very responsive and readily available. So if we do get something in the moment, we are happy to relay that and have any corrective actions taken as soon as we can.
Okay. And then if the public's noticed something, what's the best, quickest feedback loop for them?
I guess our office would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, there weren't any specific issues with trees over the course of the last, 4 or 5 years of Dreamville, is that correct?
This is the first we've at least heard of tree-related concerns for Dreamville Festival.
Right. And logistically speaking, I mean, those of us who've been out there, we've seen how pre-set up and the event is being managed. How quickly could your staff be responding to that with all the other issues going on at Dreamville at the time?
Yeah, we are dealing with a lot of things related to Dreamville. I think it depends on the type of infrastructure that is seen. If it's a truck or a car that can easily be moved, whether it's a private security team that's parked there, that can easily be corrected. If it's a generator or a dumpster that's been dropped off and we can't easily move that, that would be more challenging.
All right, thank you.
All right, the final item we have is the tree planting plan. It's a bit of a celebratory item, I believe. It's really a non-regulatory tree planting initiative on city-owned property. Zach Manner.
It's a lot of me this evening. Thank you. All right, talk a little bit about Leaf Out. So in July of 2024, it was referred by council to the Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board as an item to look at opportunities. So it became part of the Sustainability, Wildlife, and Urban Trees Committee FY25 work plan. And then in fall of 24, staff began work as part of a monthly Sustainability, Wildlife, and Urban Trees meetings to help define the project, gather information, and hear from the public. So, as stated, this is a non-regulatory planning initiative. Started out a little bit as a tree planting or tree preservation kind of piece, but as we looked at it, a tree is just one part of an ecosystem, so we framed it a little more, along with input from the public and the boards, more of an ecosystem goal, I think, than a specific tree goal. So we did use some tree terminology to kind of work through it. So one main goal is to protect trees and sensitive habitats on city property. Goal 2, the trunk, is expanding tree canopy and habitat connectivity. And then goal 3 is the leaves, so that's growing our stewardship and environmental education, so helping our public help. We can do a lot on city property, but there's a lot of property out there that folks can work on themselves in their backyards. So to break down that a little more, so the roots, we're talking about trying to conserve mature trees when possible, preserving native ecosystems, and enhancing the long-term ecological health on city-owned land. Expanding the tree canopy is a combination of connecting green spaces, filling gaps in tree cover, and supporting a climate-resilient landscape across public property. And then the growing stewardship and environmental education piece is about engaging residents, empowering volunteers, and expanding environmental literacy through hands-on restoration and learning opportunities. So as Leaf Out was going on, there's some pretty major things happening in the city at the same time, so we wanted to make sure we aligned. So we worked with our partners in planning as part of our Reflecting Raleigh comp plan, branching out. So that's a citywide engagement campaign highlighting urban trees and ecosystems. The findings and goals from Leaf Out project helped inform some of that State of the City presentation that staff provided. And they're developing a data dashboard under the Reflecting Raleigh that will help track current metrics. So taking a look at some of these important pieces will be able to be shared. And then it also aligned with Raleigh's recently completed Parks Plan. So Leaf Out supports the environmental resilience lens of the Parks Plan. It was adopted in December of 2024. And it aligns with the top implementation actions for the next 5 to 10 years, helping reinforce goals around habitat protection, best management practices, stewardship, and climate equity. So the schedule, broke it down into 4 main parts. So during the fall of 2024 and early 2025, we worked with volunteers, we worked with the Parks Board, SWAT, lots of the folks who are here with us this evening, Raleigh Parks Initiative, departmental collaborations, and engagement surveys to kind of get a sort of not to use state of the city, but find out sort of what we are and what the community really wants. We then shifted as part of, through the comp plan process as well as on our vision and goals. So that was spring, and that's what the place we're in right now. So that was a lot of community engagement and working through that dashboard development. The next steps will be fall, winter. That's sort of developing that implementation plan. We've broken it down into 3 pieces. So, and I'll talk a little bit about those in a moment, but internal development memo, succession partnership program, and stewardship campaign. And then hopefully early 2026, we'll be able to provide an update on a completed document through the Sustainability, Wildlife and Urban Trees, Parks Board, and City Council. So to give a little bit info on those deliverables and implementation, the internal development guide is guidance for balancing habitat protection and development on public land, city property, ensures early consideration of ecological priorities and project design. There'll be situations where we can't do anything and situations where we can, but we'll be taking an active look at it on the front end to do our best to get the best of both outcomes. Number 2 is the succession partnership program. So that's leveraging more volunteers and nonprofits to help support natural area management, whether that be planting, invasive removals, things along those lines, teaching classes about how to plant, how to prune, things like that. And then prioritize succession planning in undeveloped lands and repairing corridors. So we've got a lot of properties out there that are undeveloped, making sure we can maintain those as we go. And then finally, a stewardship campaign. So it's sort of a unified message across all city departments. We really want to make it as easy as possible for residents, volunteers, stakeholders to be able to learn, get involved, and take action. So helping people help us as well as helping themselves is the ultimate goal. And then the other piece, sort of an update of Leaf Out, is talking about sort of natives and invasives. So staff is putting together a native tree list. So this differs a little bit from our suggested street tree planting list. There are some trees that you wouldn't necessarily want to plant along the street that would be great in somebody's backyard or as part of a development. So we're working on a native tree list, makes recommendations for trees on private property. And at the same time, we're working internally to develop a resolution for city projects modeled on Greensboro's requirements, that we'd be promoting native plants and eliminating invasives from city projects and city properties. So that's the end of that piece as well.
Yeah, really excited to see this get to the end here, and thanks to everyone I know who's here that's been working on this with parks. I'm curious, Zach, on the native tree list, recommendations for private property, you all are focused on trees. I'm also curious whether we can have a list that would have, native shrubs, vines, perennials, and I recognize that list could be incredibly vast. So I'm really thinking of something that is more of a small, short list highlighted to help, again, private property owners, not have to go to a really large toolkit like the Extension Gardener website, but just to have a really quick look. That is something I think could be useful. And I wanted to also confirm for any development, they cannot put in an invasive tree, correct? That would not be acceptable for like a tree planting requirement?
So I would defer on private property, but in the right-of-way, you aren't allowed to plant an invasive to meet a requirement.
So if you recall, there was a text change adopted last year as part of our omnibus program that contained some language that made it explicitly clear that invasive species were not permitted to satisfy planting requirements. Unfortunately, it was one of the text changes that was invalidated by recent state law changes. So that provision doesn't technically exist in the code today, but I will say that I don't believe folks are coming in with landscaping plans with invasive species to satisfy planting requirements.
And can you tell me, are we going to be pursuing that text change again, but just independently?
Yes, we are. Pat Young with Planning and Development. That, along with a series of other omnibus changes that were not explicitly illegal under the new law, but that were passed with prohibited provisions. I think we had wanted, with some input from the Attorney's Office, wanted to wait and see what the General Assembly was going to do. There was a chance they were going to repeal some of those previous provisions. So after your summer break, we would plan on bringing you something,
Okay.
if it's necessary.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from our committee before we get to public comment? Councilmember Silver?
Zach, just for clarification, it says in July, this item was referred to the Parks, Recreation, and Advisory Board. That was the Leaf Out program per se?
Yeah, it was wanted the city to develop a non-regulatory framework for tree planting and preservation on city-owned controlled property.
So I know that there's going to be a work plan coming up very soon. So does the board work more as a working board or an advisory board? Because this seems to be more of work to be created that a park staff would normally do it. So I just, as we start the, because I have a couple other questions. So just so I understand the role and the intent of this one, in particular the Leaf Out program.
Sure. So the Parks Board has multiple different committees made up of its members that do a little more of the specific day-to-day pieces. So Greenway, a Parks group, a Sustainability, Wildlife, and Urban Trees. So it was a great venue to have those folks who are part of the board be involved, but as well as a public forum to allow participants to come and be part of that as well. So it's been sort of they act in an advisory recommendation sort of role.
Councilmember Patton?
Yeah, thanks for this. I remember sending this to SWAT long ago, so I'm glad to see it come back. I wonder about whether this plan sets goals, and in like two particular goals are coming to mind. If one is like an amount of canopy preserved or an amount of canopy reached by a certain time. And then the other one being like a bold goal for that residents can be a part of. Like I was like, what does a resident want to put on a shirt, right? Do we have, like, could we set a bold goal, like 250,000 trees for America's 250th birthday or something like that? Like, so did the members talk through things like that?
Yeah, we've have had discussions along those lines. Similarly, one thing I would say is, as it's non-regulatory, it does put some limitations on what it is we can do and can't do. So we're looking at the opportunities from a city property lens, which is a little different. Not saying that a goal or a number isn't something we can do and sort of work with the community. That would fit into that sort of outreach buy-in kind of campaign. So we're definitely talking through those options and seeing what's viable. I would add it is an unfunded initiative, so we're doing our best to try to work through it in a timely manner while being able to coordinate with citizens and stakeholders.
Okay, at this time, I want to move to public comment, and I think we'll do 2 minutes per individual, so we have enough time. Whoever would like to start, you can raise your hand or just go up to the podium. Yes, here. Please do tell us your name.
Good afternoon. My name is Jamie Ramsey, and I live at 2702 Van Dyke Avenue.
Yeah, it's got to take a minute to appear over there. Give it a second.
I can't hear.
Oh, just one moment. He's starting the timer.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your attention to the need for better
Just one
protection.
moment, almost.
Okay. I want to say I was told I'd have 3 minutes, and so I really kind of created my presentation around that. So
No, it takes a while for this to get from here to there.
can I just start?
Okay, I think now it's there.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you for your attention to the need for better protection of the beautiful oak trees at Dix Park, especially those around the big field. These important trees are a defining element of the park, and they provide us with significant ecological benefits every day. Critical root zones, or CRZs for short, are the lifeline of trees. They allow trees to take up water and nutrition, store energy, and provide structural stability. Compacting soil in root zones is damaging to the health of trees. Trees are basically defenseless and at our mercy. These root zones need to be protected for the trees to live and thrive. This year and last, I and others watched Dreamville Festival load-in and load-out activities disregard city tree regulations in the following ways. There was no tree protection fencing anywhere. Large tractor trailers and other vehicles were allowed to drive in CRZs, and equipment and vehicles were stored in CRZs. There's been no mulching of the trees or other actions to remediate damage. A tree impact permit was only required for a public art installation, even though festival load-in and load-out impacts trees more. All these things are inconsistent with city code and the city's tree manual. I tried to bring these concerns to city staff and have been told park staff can't communicate directly with festival producers. All communication must go through the special events office. I understand why to some extent, but if urban forestry is responsible for the trees, and if the trees are a priority, they should be more involved and able to ensure care for them. There are also inconsistencies and vague information in the special events documents that contribute to the problem. It's possible to protect the trees from further harm and hold big festivals in the future, too. An entirely new approach is needed, though. I'm concerned that this needs to be addressed quickly since agreements and contracts may be executed soon. I hope you will...
Please finish your statement.
Thank you very much. I hope you will stop any further negotiations or contracts being signed until new policies, permit applications, and details are worked out. I've given you all and park staff a copy of comprehensive recommendations aimed at ensuring that the trees are properly stewarded from now on. I hope they will be helpful, and I'll provide a copy for the clerk so they can become part of the record.
Jamie, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to just cut you off
Can I
to
just
be
say,
consistent.
like, 2 more things, please?
I have to be even with everyone, but we do have your comments, and I do appreciate you bringing this to our attention. I do believe everybody on the committee has those comments. So I want to go to the next person. I believe we have Sig. And again, do provide your name when you come up. Thank you. Yeah, ready to go.
Ready? Ready to roll? Great. Good afternoon, councilors. I'm Sig Hutchinson, former Wake County Commissioner. I'm here to speak specifically about the Leaf Out program, but generally about supporting our amazing and hopefully growing tree canopy. You know, we live in a beautiful, beautiful place. And I know that we collectively hear so many times from visitors that we meet, or maybe a visitor who's staying with us, about how beautiful it is here in Raleigh. They say how green it is, and there's so many trees. And I often think, as a commissioner, I'd say the best thing we can do for economic development is to give someone a window seat flying into the city, because when they look down, they say, where's the city? So many times we've been framed as a city within a park. And if Tom Earnhardt would say of exploring North Carolina, of temperate zones, we are some of the most biodiverse in the entire planet. Over 20 different species, unique species of oaks alone grow right here in Wake County. So we are a product of our own success. Yet, because we have lost over 1,000 acres of our tree canopy just in the last 10 years alone. Even though growth is good and loss of tree canopy is not terminal, there's definitely things that we can do. For example, we can plant more trees. As Commissioner, now Councilor Mitch Silver started an initiative to plant over 1 million trees in New York alone. We can encourage volunteers to help plant those trees. We can mitigate the loss of trees by capturing some of these funding to then plant more trees. We have a technology in the county to identify heat islands or hot spots within our cities where we can identify those and plant more trees. We can work with DOT.
Just finish your sentence, yeah.
Okay. DOT and the county to actually partner to build more of our tree canopy. Thank you so much for this opportunity to build our canopy and continue to keep this such a great city.
Good to see you. All right, next, please. Just wait one moment while we get the 2 minutes on the clock. Yeah, you should be good to go.
Members of the committee, Robert Mulder, 3116 Ward Road, Raleigh, 27606. Dr. Ched Shear, retired forestry professor, said the tree manual states that tree protection fencing shall be installed at a minimum radius of the critical root zone of trees. This simple strategy prevents intrusions. He says, I didn't see any tree protection fencing or signage on the site. The ordinance says shall be installed, so why no tree protection fencing? I have not seen the tree impact permit or its associated tree protection plan, so I do not know what they address. What I did see were countless violations of the tree protection ordinance. If this was a one-time occurrence, the impact might be limited in short term, but if Dix Park is to become a primary gathering place for large-scale performances and celebrations that require significant temporary off-road infrastructure, access, and storage, and he says, I hope it will, then tree protection must be non-negotiable and strictly follow the law. The solution is very simple. All critical root zones should be clearly delineated with orange tree fencing with warning signage along both the street side and the field side. The responsibilities associated with tree protection should be clearly stated in any contracts with festival organizers. Compliance should be monitored on a daily basis. If there are not enough city staff to do the monitoring, the city should train city volunteers to make sure that all of Raleigh's tree protection rules are followed to the letter. There is no excuse for doing this. One last comment. I'm aware that some people think that these trees do not need protection because they feel that these trees are nearing the end of their lives. Nothing could be further from the truth. Trees represent and support life on the planet. Tree roots typically extend 2 to 4 times the diameter of the tree's crown, and in some cases they can reach 4 to 7 times beyond the crown surface area. Depends on soil conditions and tree species. So at a minimum, it is vitally important for the critical root zone as defined in the city tree manual to be protected. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Marcia Presnell, Jeanette, 618 Stacy Street. I saw the damage around those trees, and it really concerned me. I'm glad it's getting some attention. Thank you, Jamie, for your advocacy. I have done a lot of advocating for Raleigh to join the network of biophilic cities. And we did. Well, guess what biophilic cities do? They take care of our trees. They do, and are proud of it. And they let the citizens know so that there's more buy-in. And I'm kind of concerned that all the departments in the city may not be aware of what it means to be part of an international network of nature-rich cities. I think that's something that really needs to be addressed so that all the departments in the city realize that they play a part in making sure we take care of all of our natural resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, the timer is on.
Hi, Ted Shear, 928 Ravenwood Drive. I think I heard my name mentioned a couple of minutes ago. I want to say that This is not about Dreamville at all. This is about the city of Raleigh. The city of Raleigh has laws. They own this property. They're responsible for it, and they did not follow the laws and continue not to. As Bob Mulder said, there were no tree fencing there. The laws are fine. At this point, I don't think we need to change them. They were not being enforced there. That's the city's job to do that. And so what we have here, I live in the neighborhood that is affected by that highway overlay district that was cut 3 months ago. Everybody's sitting around wondering what's happening. There's no communication, nobody knows what's going on, and the neighborhood is furious about that. So when we ask about things like what's happening at Dreamville, we're told to put in a public information request. That is not how you deal with citizens. What we have here is a situation where there are rules that apply to us as citizens, also apply to the city, but the city doesn't have to follow them, is what they're telling us. You do, but we don't. There is no better way to disaffect and disassociate from your citizens than creating a situation like that where there are rules for thee, but not for me. We have good rules. They can always be better. We have good people. They can always be more good people. They always need help. But the simple rules that you referred to, Councilor Silver, were not followed. That's all we're asking. This is not the contractor's fault. This is the city's fault. We can't expect them to know how to take care of trees. It's not what they do. They put in large events, and they do it really well. And it would really be nice if we could have a lot more large events like this. But we need to follow the rules that we have. And I think that if we can start there, we can at least get back on an even keel and then figure out what. There's no point in putting in other rules and other plans and other programs if we're not going to follow the ones we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sally Hale, 407 Oakwood Avenue. I'll keep it brief. My job takes me on the Dix campus every day, so I was going right through the whole artery of all of that, and I was taking photos because I was sort of shocked. I know that there's been an emphasis here tonight about the economic impact of Dreamville, but there's an environmental impact because there was no tree protections in my site that I saw. So I saw buildings on top of the trees, like portable buildings on concrete blocks. I saw a lot of SUVs and the four-wheel drives all parking on the trees. I saw the trucks not really clearing that pad and going over the tree roots. So I took a lot of photos, and I guess I'm encouraged by what the special events staff said about, maybe now that they know better, they'll do better as far as, if it's applied as a city code, why isn't it enforced at a citywide event as far as a tree protection plan is more my question. But equally, I'd add that who to communicate, I sent photos to Dix and the city of Raleigh, and no one did anything except forward it back to me to say, this is going to natural resources. So I didn't know of a direct path in voicing any concerns when something like the other people have brought up who we can raise these issues with in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to answer that question, Office of Special Events would be, at least in this case, the main entity. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Joseph Huberman, 904 Dorothea Drive, living right across from Dix. First of all, I want to say I'm really pleased that almost all of my points have already been covered, so I'm going to do some other stuff here. Just as lead poisoning takes many years for it to affect kids, the damage to the roots takes many years for it to affect the trees. And so we need to do the protections that people have talked about. In my house renovation, I was only allowed 6 feet to come in from the street or from the alley for the contractors to get to the house because I have large trees on the perimeter of the property. So the same sort of rules that are impacting my contractors and costing me money, the city should follow those same rules. And finally, besides all the other things that people have said, when I walked on the property, boy, as soon as I stepped in a spot that I wasn't supposed to be, security was right there saying, oh, no, you can't go in there. But yet the security was not trained to be available for the load in and load out, to say to the people driving the trucks, no, you can't go there. You've got to have the orange fencing. that goes in and load out. You can take it down so it doesn't obstruct the activities of the people. But during load in and load out, you need that fencing and you need security to be there to enforce it.
Thank you. Karen?
Thank you all for having this discussion today. My name's Karen Ringe. I'm at 1543 Sunrise Avenue, and I wanted to comment a little bit about the Leaf Out program. I do landscape design, and I work a lot with the city's Rainwater Rewards program, and I commend the city being a biophilic city, taking actions. Parks has really been expanding, growing more native plants, the things that we need to be doing, like the Rainwater Rewards program to deal with stormwater, to make us more climate resilient. I'm also really concerned, as we all have heard about the bees. We've lost up to 50% of our bee population in North Carolina, which we all rely on for our food supply. And I spent a lot of time thinking about what can we do to really expand the kinds of good plants that we need and trees in this city. And leaf out is one thing, but as we all know, that's just one small part of the footprint of the city. What can we do to encourage developers and homeowners to do more? Well, I personally might like to see a requirement, like actually the General Assembly has been doing with DOT, requiring native plants. We have some friends over there on this topic. I wonder, what can we do to encourage? So, Councilor Harrison, I agree with you. Let's go beyond trees. Let's talk about the shrubs and the perennials, the things that our pollinators need that also are creating resiliency and habitat in our city. I forgot what else I was going to say, except that I think we all have seen a lot of new development in our city, and I see a lot of invasive plants still being planted by developers. I think people who are building houses, the landscaping is the last thing they're concerned about. So why don't we make it simple? Why don't we provide a simple list? And it can be voluntary at this time. It could be for homeowners. It could be for home builders. I'd like to see the planning department actually provide it, to say, you may not know about trees and plants, but here's a list that does work, and a lot of cities are already doing that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Maggie Bailey, the executive director of We Planet Forward, a nonprofit committed to preserving and restoring the natural environment. Nonprofits like ours are powerful allies for the Leaf Out Plan. We offer vital resources beyond tree planting, including people power, expertise, community education, and grant acquisition support. To demonstrate this, I will share how We Planet Forward has partnered with the City of Raleigh over the years. Planting 36 trees in FEMA lots in 2012 with 100 volunteers. Conducting rain barrel workshops at community centers and on RTN during the 2007 and 8 drought. Coordinating native tree seed collections and planting trees at various parks. Co-hosting Earth Day and Raleigh Arbor Day celebration. And recently, planting 350 native trees at Lake Wheeler Park after invasive removal as a reforestation effort. Currently, we are partnering with Parks and Transportation to launch an initiative providing shade at Raleigh bus stops, addressing heat island effect, tree equity, and we have been responsible for securing grant funding, sourcing trees, recruiting and coordinating volunteers, and providing tools and expertise. As nonprofits, we're uniquely positioned to overcome challenges. For example, at a bus stop where right-of-way space is insufficient, we can contact the property owner about planting on their property as a solution to providing shade at that bus stop. There's so much more we can achieve together. I'm one sentence. We Planet Forward and many other nonprofits stand ready to realize the Leaf Out goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other public comment? Do I see one in the back? I see two. Yes, three. All right.
Good afternoon. I'm Matthew Brown. Thank you all so much for caring about Raleigh's trees. They're great treasures. I have two concerns. In the shopping center parking lots, we require trees, but they're almost always surrounded by curbs so that the rain can't get to the trees. And the trees never grow very big, and they're usually kind of unhealthy and puny. If we could stop doing that, the rain could actually get to the trees and they'd grow bigger and more healthy, and also we'd have less stormwater runoff. My second concern is one of our most beautiful collections of trees is right across the street in Nash Square. It is the most beautiful spot in downtown. And I just saw in the proposed budget $750,000 for advanced planning for Nash Square redo. And if it's that much to do the advanced planning, it makes me think it must be a really big project, which means they'll be cutting down a lot of those trees. Please don't let them do that. Don't let them do what they did to Moore Square 7 or 8 years ago, where they cut down over half the trees, and now it's just a big open area with nothing in it but an abandoned building. Use that money to fix Moore Square and not to cut down the trees in Nash Square. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Ian Burnett. Just wanted to lend my support to your idea for 250,000 trees or so. As a private citizen, I would be happy to add $1 or $5 a year to some of my bill to support that. And with 500,000 people in the city, we could definitely plant a lot of trees every year. If we can find funding, I know this is an unfunded project, but I leave it to the city council to find some way to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, we've got another comment in the back. Maybe, oh, two. Yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Abrams, representing Wake Audubon, a local nonprofit that advocates nature, wildlife, and environmental conservation. Our address is P.O. Box 12452, zip code 27605. Thank you for the chance to speak today. We also want to thank the Raleigh staff, Raleigh Parks especially, for their thoughtful and hard work on making Raleigh a better place for birds and people. We are grateful for the chance to collaborate with them. We've lost over 3 billion birds in the last 50 years, and recent studies show that we are not doing enough to reverse that trend. Birds are an important part of the ecosystem. They're nature's pollinators, seed dispersers, pest control, and cleanup crew, so we must do more to protect them. Native plants, especially trees, are vital to that effort because they host the insects that birds feed their young and that support all of nature. The leaf-out plan that you were updated on earlier is an important step in the right direction, and here are some added steps that the city can take. First, create a culture that values our trees. While Parks has the lead on most tree-related efforts within the staff, tree protection and promotion requires a whole-of-government approach. Second, set an audacious goal. A couple of people have talked about this, to plant many more trees, whether that's 25,000, 24,000 by the city's 240th anniversary, a large number that will inspire people to get involved and that cannot be accomplished without people getting involved. Third, issue a resolution. I was happy to see that turn up on the slide today, to publicly declare your support for native plants and define tangible steps that the city will take to promote them, like a native plant list, particularly one for developers would be really useful. And lastly, provide the resources to build capacity and systems across the staff to protect trees and nature. Thank you for all you do. We look forward to working with you to do more for our trees and nature.
Thanks, Mary. Okay, one more comment here.
Hi, my name is Sarah Hollis. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak and for bringing all these topics up before this forum today. I'd like to begin by
Again, please.
Sarah Hollis.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Very quickly, I'm deeply in support of a native plant list. I think that not only a native species list would empower city and developers with easy access, vetted recommendations, but also local nurseries and plant vendors would benefit. They'd be able to get ahead of the curve and understand that they can plan ahead and start to offer native species for wholesale and retail customers that would be beneficial to our local ecosystems and enhancing ecosystem services, like the habitat that helps the birds, that offer pest control and other wildlife. Regarding the city tree protection, I think that leaf out is fantastic. I commend the city for prioritizing the creation of parks and greenways to preserve canopy, habitat, and ecosystem services amidst development. However, I am dismayed when I see mature old-growth trees discarded when the land is stripped for the creation of parks, knowing the new trees installed will take decades to provide cooling and sought-after shade, carbon storage, soil health, et cetera, that would have remained had a few old trees been kept intact in the first place. I would like to better understand the challenges and potential opportunities for preservation of select trees during park development. Is it a matter of haste, a lack of education or capacity for site visits, site-specific planning? These trees are worth much more than their timber value, or worse, a cost of disposal. Taking all the mature trees out during park development should be a decision made with care and as a last resort. Thank you for the information about who to contact when you see tree protection areas breached. I often see tree protection areas with roots coming out of the fencing area, and I'm grateful to know that there is someone I can call. It'd be great if there was a phone number or a QR code on the tree protection signs that would help people to access that information easily. And iTree is a great tool if volunteers want to utilize it to help quantify ecosystem services for trees. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, I think that was everyone. Oh, one more? Okay.
1% battery left, so.
I love your shirt.
The timer may not be necessary anyway. Hi, I'm Dave Klemp. I'm the Executive Director for Trees for the Triangle. We're a small but growing nonprofit based here in Raleigh that plants trees in the Triangle, as our name may suggest. I want to voice our strong support for a bold, eventually well-funded leaf out plan and action. This plan must include tree preservation and conservation, proactive maintenance, and ambitious planting goals. To get this right, we'll need some guidance. Skipping through some parts here. There's an element of the plan being drafted which includes a 24,000 tree planting goal to hit our 240th anniversary. I think that's a great first step. By my back-of-the-napkin calculations, we'll need more like 160,000 trees maybe to cover just the acreage of tree canopy covered lost in the Wake canopy study the county did. So I think it's a fantastic goal, some nice numbers that line up with the anniversary. Let's start with that and then use that as a proving point, right? A case that we can show what we can do and then go from there. We'll need some bold funding moves, possibly a much smaller bond than the Parks bond that we all voted for. But Trees for the Triangle is prepared to be a key partner along with our other nonprofit friends here, especially where the city can't go, which is private property. That's one of the reasons I founded Trees for the Triangle as a City of Raleigh former employee with the Neighborhoods program, if you're familiar with that. I took everything I learned there and started Trees for the Triangle with some of that knowledge, and now I can plant on private property where the city can't plant. So we're happy to help. We may need a step stool, but we're happy to rise to the occasion, rise to the challenge to help the city reach these goals, and I hope we'll set a moonshot goal. And to misquote a late great president, ask not what your canopy can do for you, ask what you can do for your canopy. And to my fellow citizens of Raleigh, let us not ask what a greener future will cost us today, but whether we can afford not to strive toward it for our children and for our generations afterward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think we've got everyone. I see one more, and then I think we're going to cut it off so we have time for council to discuss. Yes, please come up.
Ready? Okay. My name is Fallon Owens. I did not prepare a statement, but I would like to say, well, first, I live at 4020 Brewster Drive. I am a professional wildlife biologist, and as such, I am intimately familiar with the value of not only trees, which I'm very excited to hear about, all these proposals for planting and protecting trees that we already have, but I specifically want to say my support for creating lists of recommendations of native shrubs and perennials, as well as recommendation lists for trees, because the mid-story and understory underneath trees is also vitally and critically important for wildlife. And developers developers having recommendation lists of these native species that work well, not just trees, but also those shrubs and perennials will not only support native nurseries to be able to provide those plants for large projects, but that will also create a better supply of those native plants for private citizens as well. So there's a cascading effect of benefits if we also provide those recommendations lists of trees as well as shrubs and perennials that are all native. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for bringing your passion and your commitment to trees. It's always wonderful for me to hear. For anyone who doesn't know, my PhD is actually in forestry, so I love a tree. I just want to put a kind of a check mark on a couple items that I heard, and I'd love to hear from council here what you all are thinking. First, I will also agree, the audacious goal, I think that would be fantastic to really get our community inspired. So I'm looking forward to the leaf out plan to see what is there so that we can take that to the next step of implementation and figuring out funding and how do we bring more people on board. I'd also like to just say, Karen, your native plant designs are beautiful. I saw your butterfly weed native meadow recently. It's like the corner of Gorman and Hillsborough Street, and it's city property, I believe, and it's just gorgeous. Yes, a very boring strip of grass turned into this little native meadow, great place for pollinators. So I think we know what's possible. And I guess I might want to put a motion forward. Do I need to? I'm going to ask Pat or someone out here. I know we're looking at the native tree recommendation list. Do I need to put a motion forward from the committee about adding the perennials and shrubs? And again, this would just be a kind of highlight featured list, not every native plant that could be planted.
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember. Pat Young with Planning and Development. I think that would be helpful. We have decided to proceed forward with the native tree list as a best practice, as several of the commentators have spoken of. It certainly is that. But to add that's going to be a little bit of work. So if that's a council priority, it would be appreciated if you'd add that to any future action.
Okay. So I'm just going to make that motion now that this again, voluntary recommended list for private development would go beyond native trees. It would also include other plant types like shrubs, perennials, and vines. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you. Other comments, questions? Yeah, Councilmember Silver.
Well, to my good friend Sig, just want to clarify the record. It was Mayor Bloomberg who started the Million Tree campaign. It was a 10-year campaign, but myself and Mayor de Blasio, we completed that campaign 2 years ahead of schedule. For those that just want to know, the city focused on street trees and trees in parks, and Bette Midler, her organization, Restoration Project, did the private tree giveaway for free. And so her organization called Restoration Project stationed themselves throughout the city, worked with a local nursery, and just gave it away for free. That's how we're able to achieve that goal of 1 million trees in 8 years. So just for that one. Just want to double check with the special permits, if Whitney's still here. I had said in my remarks, what was the concern? We heard from several people in the audience that they either have taken picture or observed vehicles, equipment near the base of trees. That is a concern, and that's number one. Number two, is there a requirement to put a perimeter fence around the trees for events? I just wanted that clarification so I understand exactly what happened during a large event at Dick's.
I may defer to phone a friend in parks for their requirements specifically for special events and tree protection.
So there is a fence at Dreamville. It's between the road and the trees. So there's a large fence that exists around the perimeter of the piece. So it isn't fenceless, right? So I think the concerns we're talking more about internal to external. We don't have any specific requirements for events around tree protection fencing.
Okay. Thank you. And just my last point, totally unrelated, so my colleagues are aware, but I know Sig and others know, I have a keen interest, always shared this with Stephen Bentley, taking a fresh look at our street tree plan. As was stated, in our parking lots, some of the trees seem to be undersized. It's the same on our streets. You know, keen interest in the type of trees, so I'm glad Patrick will be exploring species, but also the size of trees. Some places need large shade trees, particularly in our streets, but the way our infrastructure is that either it's DOT guidelines or the planting strip is so narrow, it will not accommodate trees. Instead, we get undersized, what I call lollipop, more ornamental trees than these majestic trees that really give our rights of way both the shade, the benefits we need from both clean air, clean water, and stormwater. So while it's not on this list, it's still a big interest of mine. And so I hope through Reflecting Raleigh, we can come back and have a deeper conversation. To me, there are huge opportunities when people talk about adding our canopy. Our streets are a huge, huge opportunity, and one that I think we should certainly take advantage of. I had that ability in New York City, where we focused on, we call it cool neighborhoods. Same what Raleigh's doing here, identify the locations where you see heat and focus on champion trees, so it provides the cooling and the benefits to those neighborhoods that need it most. But I'm very grateful about the conversation we had here today.
Councilmember Patton.
So taking them in turn by item, I thought some of the, related to sort of like tree enforcement and tree protection areas, I thought the suggestion of having like a contact shown on the sign was an interesting thought, and I don't know, are those like, do developers buy those signs at Home Depot, or do they get them from us, or like put in something like a QR code that says like, do you see an issue with a tree protection area? Report it here. Is such a thing viable, or are these really just like commercial signs? I don't know if you want to answer that now, or you can send an answer along later.
We don't provide the signage. We do provide the language that does need to be on the sign. So if that's something that you wish to be added, you could certainly request that be added to the required language that goes on the tree protection fencing.
Okay. So when I see it, when I'm driving down the road and I see tree protection fencing and it says, it's like orange, and then but it just says tree conservation area. And so that's, the fact that it says tree conservation area is by regulation.
Yes, and how big the letters are,
Letters have to be.
font, et cetera, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, let me knock that around in my brain. And then with respect to trees during large events, wherever they be located, I do sense there might be a staffing capacity issue related to catching things, and so maybe I just offer to staff if you want to think about what would be needed to match the needed capacity, and let us know if you need support from us, either tree or special event staff.
One thing I forgot to mention, Dreamville also hires a truck wrangler program. So that was specifically because deliveries were being taken to parts of the park that they shouldn't have been, whether to the chapel instead of the soccer field lots. So we could also have conversations with Dreamville organizers to have their truck wrangler program, not just wrangle deliveries that are going to the wrong place, but also monitoring where trucks are parking if they're stopped in areas that they shouldn't be. So that's another option as well.
Awesome, that sounds great. And then on the third point related to leaf out, just again, putting like an extra exclamation mark on some like big audacious goal that everyone wants to get behind, and understanding this is non-regulatory, so it's really something we want to entice private citizens to participate in by putting like a small new tree on their own property, so that we can accomplish something big together. So that's what I got.
Good.
I just want to end on kind of a upbeat note. New York City did a tree census of every tree in New York City. I'm not saying the city of Raleigh should do that they do it every 10 years. But I couldn't believe when Melbourne reached out and topped us, you actually can write a love letter to your local tree. But the cute thing is the tree will write a letter back. So hopefully we can start a campaign to increase for leaf out stewardship. Fall in love with your local tree, you write them a letter, and they'll write one back.
I love that idea. I wanted to get just a final understanding for the improved rental guide for big events. Is that something that we need a motion from this committee on, or is that moving forward?
That's just an internal resource among staff, so staff can make those updates.
Okay, and on the tree protection fencing, just so I, again, fully understand, that is not required for special events, but it is required, I think I understood, for like an art installation or?
So most of those permits for events are based on attachment to the tree, whether it be lights, decoration, things along those lines. We don't typically issue specifically for area around the tree unless there's excavation, digging, things along those lines. So most of our event-based is you want to hang lights in the trees, you want to wrap something around them, things along those lines when it's an actual attached to the above ground section of the tree.
Okay. And Zach, do you feel confident that this additional signage and fencing and protective mats will be sufficient to protect the critical root zones?
Yeah, I think with all outcomes, looking at the tree and the festival and everything together, I think it's a best case scenario for things to be, to get as much tree protection as possible while still allowing access. I know I've been to the shows out there. Sometimes it gets a little hot. It's a nice spot to be able to go to and sit under a tree. So looking at the difference between letting a person be under the tree versus a large vehicle, I think is where we can make a lot of headway.
Councilmember
So just
Silver.
for clarification, the fencing would go up for load in, load out, not the actual event, because having temporary fences with large crowds could actually be unsafe if, move over it, so it's for load in, load out, not the event per se.
Yeah, again, there is a big exterior fence, so if we're signing and putting mats in proper places, we may be limited on our need. If we do a little more delineation on those entry and exit points, help point people in the right direction, I think. Yeah, it would be tough load in, load out to be able to get it up and then put it back down and then put it back up and take it down again.
Where's Whitney? Have y'all had any conversations with the, I know you've indicated that there have been some conversations with the folks from Dreamville, but I don't want to put anything in place that's going to be overly burdensome or cumbersome for them going forward. So before you make these changes, are y'all going to have some conversations with them?
Yeah, so we'll review anything mentioned in the after action report with them. If fencing is like an added expense, we could possibly explore like paint on the grass that could mark it, so then that might be more cost affordable. Yeah, we haven't gotten into specifics with Dreamville yet.
Yeah, I just would prefer y'all have some conversations with them before you put regulations and stuff in place that they may not be able to meet or could be off-putting to them continuing the festival.
And if I might, as a follow-up in the manager's report, we will put together a list of opportunities and next steps for the council to receive. Much of it's going to be from what we heard today, and then what we hear from our Dreamville partners after we have the action report. So you can expect something maybe in the next month.
Great. Thank you so much, Nikki. And again, I just want to thank everyone here that's looking out for the trees of Raleigh. I know you care deeply about it, and I appreciate that. With that, I am going to call this meeting to close.